Joe Davis had this amazing call for Ohtani's historic day and said this on his last hit.
Oh my gosh! Shohei Ohtani! The greatest day in baseball history!
So was it? How do we quantify that? I was curious, so I thought I'd dig into it. Did Ohtani have the greatest day in baseball history? Ohtani finished the game 6 for 6 and hit 3 home runs. That's one less than the record of home runs in the game of 4. Now, 4 home runs have been hit in the game 18 times, with the latest being in 2017 by 2 guys that year, Scooter Gennett of the Reds and JD Martinez, then with the Diamondbacks. Of those 18 occurrences where this happened, one sticks out above the others. Shawn Green of the Dodgers. He finished the game 6 for 6 with 4 home runs, 1 double and a single, a record 19 total bases. I would say that this was probably the greatest offensive game in baseball history. But was it better than Ohtani's? I think there are a few things that make Ohtani's feat a little more impressive. While I don't think Green's heroics were any less than Ohtani's, the setting is what moves Shohei's day above Green's day. Ohtani went into the day looking to become the first member of the 50-50 club, 50 home runs, 50 stolen bases. Only a handful of players have ever joined the 40-40 club. Ohtani entered the day with 48 home runs and 49 stolen bases. He would leave the sole member of the 50-50 club. So, at no fault of Green, we've got to go with Ohtani for the greatest offensive game in baseball history. But Joe Davis didn't claim he had the greatest game in baseball history. He said day in baseball history. Are there other days that players had that would compete with this one? A few days come to mind. The first is Stan Musial in 1954. He had a doubleheader against the New York Giants and hit 3 home runs in the first game and 2 home runs in the second game. He finished the day 6 for 8 with 22 total bases and 5 home runs. You know, it's funny how baseball works. There was a kid in the stands that day named Nate Colbert. In 1972, that same Nate Colbert would also hit 5 home runs in a doubleheader, accumulating 22 total bases and finishing 6 for 8. The only 2 men to ever do that. It's a heartwarming story, but was this better than Ohtani's? Again, I say no. 5 home runs is historic, but there is no historical significance to this game outside of those home runs. There was a player who had a significant historical event attached to his great day. On the last day of the 1941 season, Ted Williams entered the day hitting .399.5, which would round to 400. If he sat out that day, he would join a very exclusive club, the 400 batting average club, for a full season. We've had no members of that club since 1941, but he didn't sit out, and they had a doubleheader that day. The first game, he goes in, he plays, and he finishes 4 for 5, raising his average to 404. So he got 400, he could sit out again. He didn't sit out. He goes to the last game and finishes that game 2 for 3. He finished the season with a 406 batting average. I'm pretty impressed by the bravery of that situation. If he goes 2 for 5 in game 1 and 1 for 3 in game 2, both decent games, he probably finished the season under 400, and he looks like a fool for playing. Who knows if we would remember Ted Williams as the greatest hitter of all time if he doesn't break that 400 mark there. If Williams didn't hit 400, do you know the last guy who did it? A guy named Bill Terry in 1930. Maybe he gets regarded as one of the greats. But at the end of the day, as much as I may admire it, Ohtani's 6 for 6 day with 3 home runs is going to outmatch Williams' 6 for 8 day with 1 home run, 1 double, 4 singles. Maybe to take down Ohtani, we need to match him up with someone his caliber. How about Dodgers Ohtani versus Angels Ohtani? On July 27, 2003, Ohtani pitched Game 1 of a doubleheader. He threw a 1-hit shutout. Then, in Game 2, he hit 2 home runs. He became the first player in over 100 years to start Game 1 of a doubleheader as a pitcher and then start Game 2 as a non-pitcher. The last player who did this was, of course, Babe Ruth in 1918. This is super cool. But while this is super cool, there have been 5 players in history who have pitched a shutout and hit 2 home runs in the same game. So we have to keep agreeing with Joe Davis. This day that Ohtani had with the Dodgers is so far the greatest day in baseball history. But we've got to talk about pitchers. Let's start with the most dominant stat line there is, a perfect game. A pitcher faces 27 batters and not one gets on base. This has happened 24 times, so while rare, it's not jaw-dropping. Were there any that stick out? I think there are two that get the nod. Matt Cain and Sandy Koufax both pitched perfect games and struck out 14 hitters. That's pretty dominant. Does anything match that? Well, I think so. I think there are 2 or 3 outings that match that stat line. Peyton Kershaw once had a no-hitter where the only base runner was put on by a throwing error. He struck out 15 that day. To top that, Max Scherzer had a more outstanding feat. He pitched a no-hitter where the only base runner was an error and struck out 17 batters. That may be the winner, but I still think there's a better day to represent the pitchers. It's the Kerry Wood 20 strikeout game. He tied the Major League record with 20 strikeouts and allowed 1 hit, an infield hit. This was against the Astros, who would go on to lead the league in on-base percentage and win the division with 102 wins. Very impressive game. I think it's the most dominant pitching performance in history. Kerry Wood was 20 years old and dominated a very good team. But was it better than Ohtani's? I honestly think, straight up with the numbers, I may go Wood. I probably would go with Kerry Wood. But again, with the context, there is nothing historically significant for Wood outside of his performance that day. With Ohtani, you had him joining the 50-50 club, as previously mentioned. But also, that was the day the Dodgers clinched a playoff berth. Additionally, he broke the Dodgers single-season home run record that day. He'd finished with 54 home runs. So, after looking at all this, I have to agree with Joe Davis. Ohtani's 6-for-6 performance on September 19th, 2024 was the greatest day in baseball history for a player.
In baseball history!
Thanks for watching.